What should we think about the Cowboys 2018 draft 4 years out? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, think back to what you were doing in 2018, April of 2018. We were just young pups doing this podcast. What were you doing back in 2018?
Oh, do you honestly not remember?
No.
Oh, this is fun. I was at the 2018 NFL draft in Dallas.
Oh, I forgot this draft was in Dallas.
This was the draft that I actually attended in Dallas, Texas. It was quite an exciting event. So I've got a bunch of inside knowledge of what happened in that. No, it was basically, I was watching it from 1,000 feet up, but it was quite a good time, and it was interesting to at least attend it. Yeah. And certainly it was great to go to, while it was in my hometown and our hometown of Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, so we're going to be breaking down the 2018 draft for the Cowboys. For me, this was the first draft. Actually, this is the second draft that I was covering for Bleacher Report, but I was also teaching at the same time.
That's
so
right.
I had to pre-write like slides of who I thought the Cowboys were going to pick, and it became pretty obvious early on who the Cowboys were going to draft here in the first round that I already had the whole slide written up on their first round pick and the grade ready to go. So
wow.
Yeah. Well,
you pre-graded the draft pick before it was even made.
Well, let's just go ahead and jump into this. So the Cowboys selected Leighton Vander Esch in the first round of the 2018 draft. Not surprising at all. How early into the process did we really know this was going to happen? Because I remember midway through March, it seemed like the Cowboys were targeting Vander Esch pretty heavily.
It's funny because I remember it being kind of shockingly thrown at us. Like that was my thing, was that the word kind of came down through the whisper campaigns that, that Leighton was going to be heavily considered. And I think I kind of remember being like shocked that was the direction they were thinking about going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was pretty early in the process. It's funny because I always think about the draft process in stages, right? Like the point when there's always a point where all draftniks are watching these players all year round. And then there's a point where like the kind of second and third wave of folks start showing up and start looking at prospects. I remember definitely being several prospects in before Vander Esch was the name that we started hearing. This is the name you guys need to pay attention to. And when it did, it was kind of surprising. But by the time the draft rolled around, I'm not that shocked, honestly, that you had this written up, because it was made very clear that this was where the Cowboys were thinking about going, and that this was the guy that was kind of the perfect nexus for them at pick position and value.
Yeah, so I went back and was looking at some tweets that I had from 2018, and it seemed like the Cowboys really narrowed down their search to a couple of players. They were interested in Vita Vea. Like, that's somebody that they clearly liked a lot. And it sounds like they were exploring some slight trade up. He went at 12 to Tampa Bay. Once he was gone, I think the Cowboys were good with Leighton Vander Esch. There were a couple other names that the Cowboys had circled. I think Hayden Hurst, the tight end, was somebody they were interested in. Calvin Ridley, at least a little bit, but it was
your chagrin.
Well, I mean, look at it now. It's Leighton Vander Esch. Let's talk about this as a player, because I have such mixed feelings about that pick, because I didn't love it at the time, because you're taking an off the ball linebacker that had some known spinal issues coming in to the draft.
Yeah.
He plays at a near all pro level as a rookie. 2019, 2020, banged up, doesn't play the same. 2021, plays all 17 games, starts to kind of look like himself by the end of the season, and then he hits free agency. What do you think about the pick down?
Honestly, it's such a great microcosm for this draft overall, right? Like
Yeah.
of all these folks, like it's just it was hard to get your hands around who Leighton Vander Esch was as a player. Like, I think you described it very perfectly. Like, comes in, and I mean, to say that he exceeded expectations is just like the craziest understatement of the year. I mean, he came in and was just a monster. He was just never missed any tackles, was everywhere, was swallowing up. I mean, took the defense to another level. I mean, this is a defense that, before Leighton Vander Esch hadn't seen that kind of level of play since a healthy Sean Lee.
Yeah.
And that healthy Sean Lee hadn't been around for several years, So I think that, for the Cowboys, it suddenly elevated the defense to a place that it hadn't been for a while. And I think it shocked a lot of us how well he played. And then so it was equally shocking when the following year he kind of just fell off a cliff. And obviously injuries and stuff kind of added into that. But I think, like a lot of these other guys that are on this list, it's been a situation where you feel like you got a grasp on who this player is, and then they just show you another side of them that doesn't jive with your preconceived notion. So, and then to re-sign him, it was interesting. So, I still have confidence and hope in Leighton Vander Esch, but I think his career has been a roller coaster, to say the least.
So how would you grade this pick kind of in hindsight? Because again, you got a Pro Bowl player for at least 1 year here. And it's not like he was so bad that you didn't want to bring him back. The Cowboys gave him a second contract. Now, they declined the 5th-year option, which typically tells you that you missed on a first-round pick. But at the same time, they brought him back for his 5th year because he did play better at the end of the season. So what are your thoughts here?
I honestly feel like you kind of almost have to separate evaluation with value. Like, I don't think that they necessarily got a first round pick worth of value out of it. But I also don't think that they misevaluated who they were drafting. They got a really good player, and they got a player who could play well. I just think that obviously injury played into this. I guess, ultimately it comes out to like a B minus or a B,
Yeah, I would say like a B minus because you got a good player when he's healthy. The problem has been health. And he's not reached the potential that he's been as a rookie. But again, he's still so young. He's 25 years old. You did see flashes of it at the end of the year. So I mean, it sounds weird, but I almost feel like this is a wait and see. Like, we'll have a better idea after this year, right?
That's the thing, is that it's crazy because this would have been his 5th year, right? Like in
his
the
5th-year option. Yep.
So like there is every possibility that if he plays back up to, like, this is his 2nd year in the same system for the first time, I think since his rookie year, or I think it's the 2nd year, right? I mean, I don't know that he's ever played in a system 2 years in a row, right? So if he's able to kind of regain that same sort of level of play that he had when he was a Pro Bowler his rookie year, it's hard. I mean, frankly, the Cowboys got an absolute steal because they were able to get out of his 5th-year option, and they decided for less, and then get him for the year. And I wouldn't call it his draft pick as a first round pick a steal, but I was saying for the 5th year they got a steal, and I think that for the Cowboys, it's been a rocky road, but I think that you're happy necessarily that you kind of got tied in with Leighton Vander Esch. I mean, hindsight is 2020, but it's crazy how up and down his career is, and how it could suss out to be still a good pick at this point after what we've seen the last 2 years.
All right, a couple things really quickly before we move on. I'm not really joking when I say this, but this is the first year he's going to play, like, have a full season without playing next to Jalen Smith. And I actually think that's going to help him, right? Because him and Jalen were too similar in a lot of ways.
That's exactly, absolutely.
So
it
now
exacerbated the problem, frankly.
Yeah, now that he's going to be playing with Micah Parsons, Jaron Kearse, Jabril Cox, I think you can live with a player like Leighton Vander Esch. You just can't have 2 of those guys on the field at the same time. So I'm really excited to see what he looks like in the same scheme without Jalen on the field. The other thing is, if the Cowboys didn't take Vander Esch, who would you have liked to see them draft? The options. Listen, I was a DJ Moore guy. That's who I wanted. The other guys were Isaiah Wynn, Calvin Ridley. It gets pretty shallow there. I know a lot of people liked Harold Landry, but it sounds like the Cowboys were a little bit out on him. Anybody there that you loved?
No, I mean, I think that was the other thing I was going to mention is that ultimately, it's tough to argue about the value in a vacuum of first round picks. But if you look at where the actual first round picks that year, I don't know that they would have done a ton better with any of those other guys. So I kind of think they made the right pick in a situation that may not have, ultimately been a great first round, especially where they were picking.
I agree. All right, we're going to get to the rest of this class, but I want to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including golf season, which is upon us. We've got Major League Baseball going on right now, NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' day 2 picks. And I remember being really excited about their day 2 selections. Connor Williams at pick 50 in the second round, Michael Gallup in the third round. Both of those guys started a bunch of games for the Cowboys. 57 games for Connor Williams, 55 for Michael Gallup. Gallup obviously got a long-term deal from the Cowboys. They like him quite a bit. Connor Williams started a bunch of games, as we mentioned, but Dallas decided not to give him the extension. How do you think the Cowboys did here on day 2?
I think they obviously did very well especially with Gallup. I think with Connor Williams, I think it's easy to be pessimistic because he didn't re-sign with the Cowboys, but he gave them good years and he played at an above average level. And I think despite what some fans think, I thought he was a pretty decent player for them. I mean, I think that he was able to go earn a big contract from the Dolphins. I mean, not a huge contract, but a nice sized contract for that.
Oh yeah,
for what he's done. And I think that it shows you that he was respected around the league. Now, look, does he have deficiencies? Yeah, guess what, guys? Most offensive linemen do, and his are. A little bit of a lack of strength, and it kind of showed up in some holding situations at certain times. But at the same time, I also felt like he kind of at a certain point became a whipping boy. And, there was certainly times when they were calling holding. It was just who they were picking on. And I think that, he was a guy that you could live with for sure as a starter at guard, and is not someone that's like a huge deficiency necessarily. The Cowboys just didn't want to pay him the money that he ended up ultimately making on the market, which is understandable.
He's the 6th highest paid left guard in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. Like, I mean, I think I think he's the 6th best offensive guard in football? No, but that doesn't mean he's bad.
No, that's the thing is, I think Cowboys fans were hoping he would be. See, they've been so spoiled, or we've been so spoiled with whenever you draft an offensive lineman, they turn into an all-pro. Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, Travis Frederick, that when you draft somebody in the second round and they turn out to be who you were probably thinking they were going to be or who they should or expected to be, we're all disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Most teams would love to spend the 50th pick on a guard, get 4 starting seasons out of him, and then, okay, now we get to decide whether we want to pay him as a top 5 guard or not. Like, that's a good problem to have, Cowboys fans.
Exactly. And I think that's what the context that everyone needs to keep in mind when they're evaluating him. And then obviously with Michael Gallup, look, I'm a huge Gallup fan. I like, obviously most Cowboys fans are, I'm sure, after watching him play. I think that, he is probably the best number 2 receiver that you could ask for on a team. I don't know that he's quite a number 1 receiver, but I think he would be as good as you can get as a number 2 wide receiver in a normal situation.
Yeah, the problem is he's been kind of the wide receiver 3 the last 2 years, right?
That's right.
And he's overqualified to do that role. Yeah. And the Cowboys know that, and that's why they paid him. They know that, hey, we can have a very high-flying offense, high-powered offense with Gallup being our number 2, and they paid him like a top-end number 2 receiver. In fact, and if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, I didn't love the Michael Gallup contract when it happened. I mean, things change pretty fast. Now. Yeah, I mean, Terry McLaurin's getting $10 million more per year than Michael Gallup. Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing too. And that's also ultimately why you feel comfortable with, kind of moving on with Cooper, is that you have a lot of confidence with Gallup. Look, I know it's hard to look at the short-term situation with Gallup because he is recovering from an ACL and say, they're underserved at the wide receiver position, but the long-term outlook for the Cowboys wide receivers position, if you get a healthy Gallup back, obviously I think they're making it a priority to re-sign CeeDee Lamb. You have to love those two as a duo when they're healthy, and I think that will be something that's arriving by mid-season this year. It's about getting to there and feeling good about Michael Gallup. I mean, absolute steal in the third round pick as far as
and I was as you were talking, I was looking up to see like where Michael Gallup finished in receiving yards over the last 4 years for every receiver drafted like in the third round or beyond, and it's like 7th or 8th. Like there's just not many guys that you can draft at that late. Pick 81 and expect him to have those kind of numbers. I mean, through 4 seasons, and he's missed some time. He's got almost 3,000 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns. Like that's just, you don't find that very often.
Think about what he was walking into his rookie year. I mean, there was so much being put upon him. Despite what we felt like, it did feel late for Cowboys to be drafting a wide receiver in the third round, despite, because they had a need there. So it was when Gallup landed them in the third round and they were able to get him and he was able to produce so well, despite not having anyone else to pull coverage away from him. That was really an impressive output by Gallup, and it really kind of bode well for his future.
Yeah, so here's the official number. So this is every wide receiver drafted between round 3 and 7 since 2018. Most receiving yards, Terry McLaurin at 3,090, Michael Gallup 2,902. That's the list. Like that's only crazy. Terry McLaurin. So again, you can't expect to get anything better than Michael Gallup in the third round. I mean, they struck oil there. So what a pick by the Cowboys there in the third round. Let's get to their day 3 picks because maybe even better. This is becoming a theme of these shows. The day 3 selections by the Cowboys, really, really good. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock up on all the parts you need. Rock Auto has everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, let's finish up with the day 3 selection, starting with Dorrance Armstrong in the 4th round. Dorrance Armstrong, kind of a slow starter. We were kind of hearing about the hype for the first couple of years. Finally broke out in 2021 with 5 sacks. The Cowboys rewarded him with a big contract. Not a big contract, a decent contract this offseason. I think Dorrance Armstrong is going to have the best year of his career here in 2022.
I do too. I think that Dorrance Armstrong is a guy that came into the league incredibly young, and let's look at even beyond that. Dorrance Armstrong played at the University of Kansas. And if anybody knows anything about college football, University of Kansas is not putting a bunch of players into the NFL, despite being a Division I Big 12 school, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that this is a guy that had a different kind of development curve, right?
You know how many games Kansas won in the 3 years he was there?
Can I guess? 3 years.
3 years.
4 wins.
3 games.
I guess low.
0-12, 2-10, 1-11.
So this is a guy that they probably didn't get a bunch of great coaching, as far as development goes. Was so much better than everyone else that was on the team with him that they basically had to move him and use him wherever they could to do anything. And then comes into the league at, I think he was 20 years old when they drafted. I mean, he was incredibly young. And so he's now in his 5th year, right? At 25 years old, and didn't get a ton of opportunity to get on the field, despite flashing quite often in training camp. I obviously can attest to that part. Every single year in training camp, Dorrance Armstrong is that guy who just flashes and flashes and flashes. And then, for 3 years straight, I really felt robbed by Dorrance Armstrong, but because he wasn't able to quite, despite really, really showing out and doing it at a consistent level, wasn't really able to translate that production to the field. Flash forward to this last year, he's kind of almost a forgotten guy on this roster, right? I mean, because you have Randy Gregory, Micah Parsons has started to come on. Obviously, Tank Lawrence is Tank Lawrence. And Dorrance Armstrong was a guy that was kind of your fourth defensive end. They had also signed another guy come in. Suddenly, Dorrance Armstrong wakes up and he becomes this monster. He's able to they use him all over the place. They have to stand him up. He's able to drop into coverage. He's able to rush the passer. He gets almost as many sacks as Randy Gregory. Not quite. He's not putting the pressure on that Randy Gregory. I'm not suggesting that, but he's showing you that he's developed and that it's starting to click into his place. And really, 25 years old is not, that's not an abnormal age. I think the problem is that he's been in the NFL for 4 years at 20, and now he's maturing into a fully grown man's body, and his athleticism is catching up. And I think it's starting to click for him. I have high hopes that Dorrance Armstrong could take even another step or two from here, because he's just so young and he's got all this experience now, and now he's really got an opportunity to kind of see what he can do.
Yeah, let's move on to the next pick, Dalton Schultz. I mean, finding tight ends in the draft just anywhere is a really difficult thing. And when you find somebody like Dalton Schultz, who is an adequate blocker, a very good receiver, here late in the fourth round, it's really hard to do. It should also point out the Cowboys were kind of forced into this pick, because if you remember correctly, Jason Witten announced his retirement. I believe it was after day 2 of the draft. Like, the Cowboys were scrambling. I firmly believe the Cowboys would have selected like Hayden Hurst in the first round if they knew Jason Witten was retiring. It was a shock to them. So in the fourth round, they picked Dalton Schultz, and over the last 2 years, Landon, he's got the 7th most receiving yards for tight ends, and he's only like a couple of yards behind guys like George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski, Darren Waller. And the Cowboys franchise tagged him this year because it's tough to find top 7, top 8 tight ends in the league.
Jason Witten doing the Cowboys favors even then, from avoiding Hayden Hurst so they could draft Dalton Schultz. That's amazing.
Wow.
Look, we don't have enough time, as far as I'm concerned, to talk about Dalton Schultz, because I've been a Dalton Schultz fan since he was at Stanford. I loved Dalton Schultz game coming out of Stanford, because you don't see, and despite what people may say, you don't see guys who have the blocking technique that he had coming out of Stanford. The technique, he didn't have the size or the power to go with it yet, but the technique he had coming out was ready to go. He understood leverage. He understood how to use it. And what he needed to kind of fully develop was refine some route running, get a little bit bigger, get a little bit stronger, get a little bit faster. And those are all things that you have the ability to get better at when you get into the NFL. I liked him a lot, because he was the kind of rare situation where the stuff that was hard to teach, he had already learned at Stanford.
Yeah,
that's why I think it was, even though it took a while for his game to take off, that's mostly has to do with, opportunity. Once he got his opportunity, especially these last few years, he showed you what he could do. The Cowboys got a real steal. And I think that this is kind of a great model, because they've had success here of getting these guys kind of in the mid rounds. And even if you don't hit on every one of them, develop all of them. And use them all if you need to, because tight end is a position that's very difficult to learn, especially in college. So if you can find one in the middle rounds who develops into a starter plus player for you, sign him. The Cowboys. We've got 10 days, guys. Do it. And if you're going to wait till next year, that's fine. Do it too. But what I don't want to see is them waiting more and more to try to sign a tight end in free agency. So, sign it. There's only one way, as far as I'm concerned, to get these guys. You draft them and develop them. Otherwise, you got to find a way to not use a tight end.
The Cowboys have shown over the last couple of years that they're okay franchising somebody and letting them continue to prove it. Like, they're willing to pay more to have a little bit more certainty at the position. They did it with DeMarcus Lawrence. They did it with Dak Prescott. I think they're going to do it again with Dalton Schultz. I think Schultz is going to have another 700 to 800 yard year. They'll have 3 seasons now of production, and we'll see if he improves as a blocker. If that happens, I don't think they're going to have any issue giving Dalton Schultz the bag. At least that's my thought. Maybe they go in a different direction next year, but I think that's what they're waiting to see. It's just one more year of production. All right, a couple other picks that the Cowboys had. Let's talk about the other hit that they had. Here in the 6th round, Cedric Wilson, pick 208. Now, Cedric Wilson didn't play at all as a rookie because he was injured. 2019, he caught 5 passes for 46 yards. I remember going into the 2020 and 2021 seasons, you and I were talking about maybe the Cowboys release him to save a couple extra pennies on the salary cap. And then he explodes in 2021, 613 yards, 6 touchdowns. He also has a couple of big plays in the passing game as well. He had a touchdown in 2020. Obviously, the Cowboys couldn't re-sign him just due to some of the cap stuff. And I don't think you necessarily wanted to either. I don't know if it's a good strategy to pay a
Yeah.
number 3 receiver. But Cedric Wilson, bona fide NFL player, and I think can be a good starter for the Miami Dolphins.
I think Cedric Wilson is exactly the reason why character matters when evaluating a player. Now, I think people get it misconstrued, and they think that it has to do with locker room dynamics. And sometimes that does come into play for sure. But Cedric Wilson is a guy who had decent athletic traits, but really just needed time to kind of continue to develop them and the willingness to put in the time to develop them. And I think that, you talked about the explosion in 2020 season. That was because he changed his body that offseason. If you remember, like he came into that 2021 training camp looking like a completely different athlete. And that had to do with his personality and his, work ethic and his commitment to working hard, because that's not the only thing he changed. He also became, Dak's passing buddy all the time. He made sure to stick close to the playbook. He understood what to do. He became useful in many, many different ways as a special teamer, as a trick play guy, because he could throw the football. He was willing to do whatever it took, and he put in a lot of extra time, and he took what was, very good, pretty good physical skills and made them better. And suddenly, changed all that from being a 6th-round pick to being a guy who got paid pretty good money on the market. So I think congratulations to the Cowboys for correctly evaluating Cedric Wilson and identifying that kind of thing. And then obviously huge congrats to him for putting in the work and effort to become that kind of player that takes a 6th-round draft pick and turns himself into a big money wide receiver free agent.
Absolutely. Again, pick 208. You get a guy that plays 4 years for you, gets a big contract, and he's going to reward you with a comp pick next year. I mean, that's how you draft, right?
That's
there.
winning. Yeah, that's winning it.
A couple other picks that the Cowboys had this draft. Mike White didn't end up winning the backup quarterback job for the Cowboys, but he did light up the Bengals last year for 405 yards and 3 touchdowns. I don't want to say he's the best day 3 quarterback the Cowboys have drafted recently, but he's close.
I mean, it's crazy. Like the thing that's funny to me is that Mike White was the guy that when I'm looking at this list, I'm going, look how many. Okay, maybe they didn't hit any home runs here, but you and I were talking about this. Look how many singles they hit here, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just nuts. Like how much they were able to kind of at least identify a guy from Western Kentucky,
NFL talent, right?
Yeah, who could come in and play NFL football. Like that's what they're saying. Even the other guys that we're going to mention here in a sec. They came in and were able to do something on some level on some teams. And that's just about good scouting. So yeah, bravo to Mike White. I mean, he hasn't done ton since that one, but he had a 400-yard game. You said like
405 yards against the Bengals, upset the Bengals this year.
That's right. So, you identified the talent correctly. Maybe it just didn't happen on the timeline you hoped.
Yeah, a couple other players. Chris Covington, linebacker. The Cowboys drafted him with the idea that he was going to play special teams. He stuck around for a while, played 2 years with the team, has kind of bounced around since then. You'll see him every once in a while get some tryouts. He was with the Colts a couple years ago. I think he's in the USFL now. Whatever. 6th-round linebacker, not a big deal. Last one, Bo Scarborough. Big running back from Alabama.
Yeah.
Didn't end up doing anything with Dallas. Did start a few games with the Lions. Played with the Seahawks in 2020. He was with the Raiders in 2021. Went to the USFL this year. He was actually the leading rusher for the Stallions, who happened to win the USFL's championship. Not a great NFL career, but a professional football running back. I mean, it's fine. It's a great 7th-round pick.
If you believe in running back wins, then he won the USFL championship.
Yeah.
And I know Marcus does. No, the other thing too, did he score a touchdown against the Cowboys during the regular season?
Yep.
The Lions, maybe?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a fun moment. I definitely remember being very thrilled about that, about hearing about that on Twitter later.
It's whatever. We don't have to spend much time on, because I really want to talk about their undrafted class, because
Yeah.
so they, as of right now, they have 4 players still on the roster. They gave 4 of these guys second contracts: Leighton Vander Esch, Michael Gallup, Dorrance Armstrong, and Dalton Schultz, who's on the franchise tag. Okay. They also had 2 other guys get paid in free agency quite a bit: Connor Williams and Cedric Wilson. The Cowboys will be getting comp picks back for both of them. They also signed Travaris Ward in free agency, or in undrafted free agency. He didn't end up making the roster because they traded him for a reserve offensive lineman for the Chiefs, who never played a game, which I still don't get. And he signed a big contract with the 49ers this offseason. So you were talking about like 7 to 8 guys that they identified as NFL players that got second contracts going into 2022. It's a pretty good draft, Landon.
I honestly think, and the only one that they didn't hit on was a situation where I'm pretty sure they just confused Chris Covington with Christian Covington, and
The defensive tackle. Yeah.
They somehow managed to their worst pick was a guy that was the second best Chris Covington on their team that year, which is pretty surprising.
Yeah. I mean, what a draft for the Cowboys. It's weird because going into this year, I don't know if you think of any of these guys as like cornerstone guys outside of Michael Gallup, right? Leighton Vander Esch is the only one that's made a Pro Bowl. He's the only one that's really been close to a Pro Bowl, but it feels like you hit like 7 singles, a couple of these maybe doubles, but that's still impressive. Like most teams don't hit on that type of volume.
No, it's the batting percentage. If we're going to continue this baseball analogy, it's the on base percentage that's impressive here. It's that you were able to consistently get something out of every single pick. Were any of them, the big home runs? Not really. I think Leighton Vander Esch got close, but wasn't quite there. And there's still some chance there for some of these guys.
Sure.
But I think that what you see is that. Making solid contact with the ball, just doing, just picking the guys that land to you, and then reaping the benefits when they were able to develop.
This isn't the draft that changes the course of a franchise like the 2016 draft for the Cowboys, which we've covered, or the 2021 draft where you got Micah Parsons, or the 2020 draft where you got Trevon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. It's not one of those drafts. But it's a really important draft, the type that you need to be a consistent contender in the NFL, right? If you can find 5 starters in one draft, even if none of them are high quality starters, you're crushing it. And that's what the Cowboys did here. I think it individually, I think you give all these picks like somewhere between like C+ and B, but as a whole, I give the class like an A-.
If the Cowboys class this year has the level of hits that this class had, I would be thrilled. That class turned out like that.
I'm just hoping it's not like the 2019 draft, which we will cover very, very soon. That's the draft that I'm not all that excited to talk about. But all right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Now make your second listen to Locked On NFL Podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. You can follow the Locked On NFL Podcast and the Locked On Cowboys Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out over on YouTube as well. You can follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB, and I am at Marcus _Mosher. And we'll see you guys next time.